Ah, hello everybody, and welcome back to our last panel.
Thanks very much, Jennifer. Good afternoon, and everyone. Thank you for joining us on, and for some of us, afternoon or evening. I'm Carol Meissner. I'm on the board and executive of Esport Canada, and since these folks are much busier than I am on the committee, I'm pleased to help out by moderating today's session about what Esport Canada is working on and the different levels of the ecosystem, because we've got a lot going on here. We're fortunate to have 3 of the 6 board members of Esport Canada with us today for about the hour. I appreciate that you guys are making the time on the weekend. All of Esport Canada is run by volunteers, and each one of you could fill up an entire hour or more because all the great initiatives that you guys have happening. So we're going to try and squeeze this all in. If anyone has any questions, Jen, I've completely given up on trying to figure out how to do chat. So I'm going to have to default to you to let me know if any of them do come in with a nice gentle interruption to let me know what questions we can answer along the way. I'm going to be answering or asking the questions in order of community. So we're going to go from local to international. So we're going to start with those that are the closest to home. So Nathan, he's the chair of our Education National Council. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, roughly what your title covers, and while we're at it, just a brief journey of how you got involved in this role?
For sure. I'm probably the newest person to this group. My name is Nathan Koblun. I'm the chair of the Esport Canada National Council, as has already been shared. And for myself, I got into esports just from watching the impact of it around COVID and when students were getting disconnected from traditional sport. And beyond that, I have been uh, recently added to the board here in order to take a look here based on my work at the Manitoba level. And so looking forward to building and developing stuff here at the national side. Just recently came off a national competition that we ran a couple of weeks ago and looking forward to seeing more growth in the area.
And could you just quickly let everyone know when we say the Educational National Council, what part of Esport Canada does that cover?
So our focus is on schools. So our focus is on building school-based programs that have teachers involved with students, and whether working at the local side with individual schools or working at the provincial side where schools are organizing, competing against each other, and then obviously coming together here at the National Council with representatives that represent each province to look at long-term planning.
Thanks. That helps with starting the structure of how Esport Canada is set up. So that kind of brings us next to Tyler, because you've got the other part of the school system. Tyler is our chair of Post-Secondary National Council. And so can you tell us, same thing, a little bit about yourself and sort of roughly what your title area covers?
Sure, glad to. So my name is Tyler Hetherington. I am the esports director at Fanshawe College and board chair, chairperson-elect. And within Esport Canada Post-Secondary, we have a whole council of esport directors or esport leaders within our industry and within our kind of area that all want to kind of better esports on the post-secondary level across Canada, and we want to help elevate it at every school. We have schools of all sizes involved, and We want to make sure that we can help schools grow from the club basic level to try to get to the full varsity side of things, and all the challenges and things that happen in between. So we help activate schools with their programs. We help improve them with their questions, and we host biweekly meetings with every school involved within Esport Canada. Our council meets biweekly, and our main goal is just to elevate esports on post-secondary across Canada, not just within our own programs. So it's really nice that we've all come together under one goal, and we all want to see everybody succeed. And I love to see that. Like, there's friendly competition between schools, but really we all want everybody to do well. So that's rare in the post-secondary space, I would say, sometimes in competition, but that's the banner we've fallen under, and we love it. And we're here, and we collab with Esport Canada as much as possible, and we're just here to help elevate.
Fantastic. Thanks there. And to round out our quick intro of everybody, Melissa, our chair, CEO, and many, many other hats. Could you give us a quick just idea of what your role covering?
Mhm.
This is the sort of the intro level, and we'll dig a little bit deeper as we go on, but a little bit too of how you got to this role of heading up Esport Canada.
Yeah, of course. So, hello everyone. It's great to be back again this year to share a little bit more. And for those of you who don't know a little bit about our origin story, this had started as a program that I had developed locally here in Winnipeg back in 2016. That evolved into a provincial organization, which developed into a national organization. And then we were approached by different stakeholders from various aspects of the ecosystem to expand. And so that's how we became Esport Canada as we know it today, with three distinctive branches looking at education, which is those K-12 school programs that Nathan had talked about, with post secondary, as Tyler had mentioned, and then our competitive branch, which is very broad and ranges from supporting your local grassroots programs all the way up to our national teams. And so within that space and within my role, juggling the hats of both CEO and chair, really my role in all of this is to create opportunities and spaces for these incredible people that I work with to really create opportunities for their communities to thrive and to flourish. And then I also support a lot with networking and advocacy, whether that be internationally, nationally, or locally, depending on what the need is.
Fantastic. That's such a broad one. I can't wait to dig deeper into each one of those areas as we continue on here. So back to Nathan for a sec. Now, when you say we've sort of introduced it's K to 12. What are the strongest provinces right now, or what level are each of the provinces at in developing this? Do we have high schools everywhere? Just K to 9 or 8 everywhere? What's it looking like today?
I would say today, I mean, that's a bit of a loaded question because as we get further on, I'm going to get a chance to talk about what's happening in Alberta, where I don't have a provincial organization, but I have so much richness coming out from at the individual school level. And so, as far as the organization aspect here at the K to 12 level, we see provincially, Manitoba and Ontario both have really strong K to 12 organized esports scholastic programs that are running multiple titles in competition on a regular basis, with plans that are focused on not just competition, but on skill development, as well as like personal development, bringing in people who are working with students and with coaches, and looking at developing the ecosystem in a very organized and targeted way. But we have member schools that have connected with us from all the way over in BC, all the way over to New Brunswick. And all of those schools are at some point in their journey right now in finding what esports means to their students, what esports means to their province. And as far as the timeline, we have a strong program coming out between grades 5 and 6, all the way up to what we would call the middle years. I would say around 14, 15 years old, and then we have more developed at the high school level. And again, that's under 18 section are the two that we focus on probably a lot of our resources in developing.
Thanks. That was sort of for me the more muddy area. The other ones are a little bit easier to understand because you've got a lot going on at that level. I'd like to separate, just give you guys a heads up, a little bit about competition and a little bit about what else we do. So I guess keeping you on the hot seat for a sec, what does competition look like and play look like for your constituents? Like, does it change by grade level? Do you have different types of tournaments going on?
Competition at the K to 12 level, we kind of take a look at that you know, what are we doing to offer development versus showcasing, right? And so a lot of the tournaments that we've run at the Esport Canada EDU level have been open tournaments where we've invited people at all skill levels, but we have natural sorting mechanisms to try and separate our stronger programs that are there to showcase their talent and their skill, and then also for developing programs where they're still working on skill development or lower levels, because we recognize that esports is for everybody, but we also recognize that right now in our nation there's a huge disparity of skill across all of the provinces, depending on where their programs are. And so when we're taking a look at what competition looks like, we often, my focus is trying to empower those provincial organizations, specifically in Manitoba and Ontario, in considering how esports can impact all of those different age groups, and trying to ensure that they're taking a look at, okay, what is a high level competition looks like? How are you including all of your members?
In other words, you're trying to do all things for all people at one time. That's, I think that's says a lot of what Esport Canada is trying to do right now, is really get out there for everyone. So, go ahead.
No, I mean, I was just gonna say it really comes back down to, and I think Tyler put it best just a little bit earlier, where we're looking at elevating, right? We see so much happening across our country, and a lot of this came from all of these little dots that were doing all these different little things, and doing what I can to try and elevate and promote what's happening here, and giving all of these little dots across our country a voice and a way to organize.
Fantastic. So, Tyler, that segues nicely over to you. Was sort of a similar question, because you're also dealing with the fact that all the schools are at different levels. So, what kinds of opportunities are you providing? I know post secondary does have some different levels of membership, but also different types of competition. If you could kind of let people know a little bit about sort of what's being offered in Canada as far as the different opportunities at the different levels and what those different levels are.
Yeah, it's really fun that on the post-secondary side, we're pretty lucky in the fact that a lot of us compete North America wide. So we're all in leagues where we compete with all the American schools as well. So the main competition that you will see from most of our schools is in those international leagues. But one of the great things that Esport Canada Post-Secondary does is we do our nationals every year. And it's a big deal. People who have won nationals have put banners up in their ceilings and their roofs of their esport arenas and such like that. So, it's very, very similar to what athletics would do when you win a national championship. So it's really nice. And we've done a lot more lands this year than we ever have across Esport Canada Post-Secondary. And sometimes Esport Canada Post-Secondary was heavily involved, and sometimes we were just minorly involved, but we're always, in support and helping any way possible. One of the big things we do on the competition side is advocate for our Canadian schools in those international leagues. Because a lot of the times those international leagues, like, they enjoy Canadians being in there, but they don't know our perspective and this unique struggles that we'll have at the Canadian schools. So we, as a group, Esport Canada Post-Secondary, we come together and we have a seat pretty much at every league that we compete in, and it's a small but mighty seat, because we speak loud for every Canadian school. So that's really nice. And yeah, within Esport Canada Post-Secondary, we do have schools that apply to be officially attached with us, and we do give them tags, whether it is levels of where we believe their school is at, whether that's varsity or club. And I think we're up to, I think there's 12 schools that we consider kind of at the varsity level right now. And then we have the affiliate level and club level. And one of the reasons that we do have those tags and have those different levels is to help elevate those schools. So those schools can say, here is what a varsity school has and supports, and here's what we don't have, and here's how we want to elevate from club to affiliate to varsity. And we have varsity schools that don't compete heavily in varsity. but the way they built their community and the way that they're just so important to the student life on their campus is that they qualify for that varsity status. And most schools in Canada, they're not the high competitive schools. They are, supporting the esport communities that are on our campuses and giving them a chance to compete against other schools at various levels. So one of the things that we do that's really great is we talk to the directors across Canada, and we be very blunt and honest with them on where their school is and where the competition that they should be competing in is. And, we hear a lot of amazing feedback from those directors who originally thought, they're just going for those high level championships right away. And we kind of tell them like, oh, yeah, enter here and go to these competitions first at the correct level for your teams to compete in. So, there's a lot of support. And again, we just, keep doing that with elevating schools, and we've seen a lot of schools move from club to affiliate to varsity within this short amount of time that Esport Canada has been involved in this way. So it's amazing to see, and we see new schools coming in all the time, so that's always great to hear. But yeah, that's where we are at with competition. We do have our Canadian only competitions, but most of our programs are competing in international leagues, and there's pros and cons to that, but mostly pros, so it's great.
Thanks, Tyler. I can attest, working for a school that has students involved in the organization, having those standards of excellence that you guys have outlined is really, really helpful for having discussions with management and administrators to say, this is an example of what a good system would look like, and having that leadership in the community. So that's been very, very, very important for us.
Yeah, it's been great. We go into some of those meetings now, and like the people, the standards of excellence kind of get that intro meeting out of the way, because their first meeting, they're like, all right, what do we need to do to support esports? And if they've already read the standards of excellence, they kind of have an idea going into our conversation. So it kind of saves us a few meetings, which is nice. And we know some newer schools who are creating varsity level programs have literally copy pasted our standards of excellence and said, this is what we need to do. So it's amazing to see. Yeah.
Cool. Melissa, I get to put you on the hot seat. You've got a couple of hats today. If you're also representing the competition side, in addition to all the other things that you're doing. If you could let us know a couple of things, a little bit about the ecosystem in Canada for like community events, just to say how Esport Canada can be involved or what's happening out there. A little bit about provincial associations, and then afterwards, I'll come up with an international question after. Leave you
For
those two to
sure.
start.
Yeah, absolutely. So within our provincial structure, we have seen some interesting patterns emerge in terms of development of associations in Canada, in that Western Canada seems to have really adopted that sort of model that sort of parallels what we see in traditional sports pretty quickly, in that we have the Alberta Esport Association, the Saskatchewan Esport Association, BC has one, Yukon has one, Manitoba has one. So everything west really has kind of followed that traditional sports model. And what we've been noticing is that it's not about creating something new that didn't exist already. It's that, just like we saw within post secondary and within education, there are pockets of things that are happening all over the country. And so what we're trying to do is create intentional spaces for conversation to happen, for them to have a space and a reason to come together and showcase, like, this is what we're doing, and hear stories from other places, to glean ideas, to find where there might be similarities in different obstacles they might be trying to overcome, or someone is faced with a particular challenge in working with their provincial government and trying to access funding, which is always a really challenging piece for all of our ecosystem right now. And when we're looking at those kinds of questions, having that forum to kind of air that frustration of what kind of roadblocks you're facing, and hear from others who may have already worked through some of that, is a really helpful thing. And so as we do that, we want to make sure that we are becoming more intentional about creating spaces for those conversations to happen. I will say that it's been a little bit slower getting that side more comfortable with that sort of uh, format that seems to have come quite naturally in the education and the post-secondary spaces. But now that it's starting to really shake up, especially with some different events that we're going to be hosting later throughout this year, that is really shifting that conversation and allowing for more dialogue to happen on a more consistent and regular basis, which really allows growth.
Yeah, I can see developing all of these different esports communities, trying to connect them and bring something that used to be, we'll say, much more casual
Mhm.
into this more formal, like you say, structure and communication. That's definitely not something you can do overnight, is changing an entire esports culture. So
Definitely.
your role, though, also goes beyond that. And if you
Mhm.
could give us a little bit of, I guess, two parts to the international question here, is could you give a little bit of an overview of how Esport Canada sits in the global ecosystem? Because there are other
Mhm.
organizations, where it fits internationally. And then after that, let us know, like, any sort of Canadian competition, like where are we competing or what are we doing
Yeah,
next?
absolutely. So internationally is a really the whole international scene in general is quite interesting in that it has a lot of different opportunities, um, but it's also very network driven. And so there are, like, I'm sure many of you have heard about some of the major international competitions that are coming up, and it feels all very convoluted because we have the Global Esport Games, and we have the Global Esport Tour, and we have the World Esport Championships, and we have the oh, what's the other one? The World Cup, World Esports World Cup was the other one, and all of them seem to be doing or trying to do the same thing. And how do all of these pieces play together, and who's doing what? And so, realistically, within that, what our function is in the international space is making those connections, having those conversations, and understanding how the international scene is starting to shift and change. It's been a very unstable market for quite a while now. And so, what we're trying to do is navigate some of those changes and look at what opportunities are there for us to develop nationally that are stable within a shifting international market. And so, how do we build that into these conversations that we're having as well? So, when we're looking at those international spaces, some of the things that we've been able to do is not only just compete, as I'll speak to in a moment, within the International Esport Federation and the Global Esport Federation, but we also have the opportunity to have a seat at the table and advocate for Canadian players, for Canadian coaches, for Canadian ecosystem to have a more equitable opportunity. And the thing that has been interesting to observe is that we have actually been able to make some significant progress in a very short amount of time, particularly when it comes to uh, qualification into world events and how that regional delineation process happens. Something that we ran into last year and in the year before as well was that they had, in the regional qualification into worlds, you had to compete in cones. So there was Canada versus US as the northern cone, and it was just one slot to go to Worlds, Canada versus the US. And when we look at population, when we look at funding, when we look at development, it was a David and Goliath kind of situation. And while I'm all for taking down the giant, realistically, I wanted to find an opportunity for us to make this a more equitable space, because when we look at traditional sports, you don't generally have Canada or the US. They're often both represented at those world level competitions. And so it was looking at how do we have this conversation and navigate ways to have the opportunity for not just ourselves, but also for some of the even more equity deserving nations, and looking at how can we leverage our position of strength and our position of influence to support them as well. If we are really going to be behind this idea of EDI and of esports being for everyone, then we need to make sure that we're all growing together, and that means looking for those opportunities to make systemic changes and advocate for systemic changes that allow everyone to grow and develop. Um, So within that competition space, our major competitions right now are within the International Esport Federation and the Global Esport Federation. But I will also make a note or a mention, because I know I've had questions come up around, well, what about the Global Esports Tour and the World Esport, or the Esports World Cup? How do those fit into this? And because there's an element of nationalism in those competitions as well. Who are they? Like, who gets to go to those? And it's been interesting to see how all of those different competitions are being navigated right now, in that those ones seem to be more of like a FIFA or an NHL All Stars kind of setup, in that they're looking for players from teams that are represent a country, but the route to qualification circumvents all of the national federations globally. So none of the national federations anywhere across the globe are actually involved in that process for the Esports World Cup and the Global Esports Tour. Those ones, what they're doing is they're using competitions like DreamHack, they're using competitions in those different game titles to qualify people and then look for top national representation and inviting them individually to those competitions. So it's a very different structure than the ones where we get to then have a qualifier where anyone 18 plus, including all of our post secondary players, are able to then try out, compete, and then represent on those international stages where they're getting, you know, tens of thousands of views and exposure to all kinds of brands, and all the top teams and franchises are there to scout. Like, that's a really big opportunity, especially with the post-secondary crowd, to consider, is that more involvement in those international competitions actually gives greater exposure to potential um, employment, because they are doing a lot of active scouting at those events. And so even if you don't come out as a top winner, you're still getting that opportunity to network that is really, really crucial.
Out of all of those, because there's so many going on, which which is the next competition that
Yeah.
Canada is sending Canadian delegates to? Because I'm sure anybody who's new to this is going, hold it, you've listed 5 different types
So
of
many different
tournaments.
things,
There's so
right?
many options, but really right now there's tryouts, there's active
Yeah.
teams being selected for just
Yes.
one competition very soon, which
So the International Esport Federation is the one that has the next that we are aware of. I know Global Esport Federation should be giving us an update sometime later this month as to when the regional competitions will be happening for their events. But our general schedule or timeline for the year is that we would have the Pan Am regional qualifiers for IESF in Brazil this August. Then we would be looking at the World Esport Championships again through IESF in Saudi Arabia in November. And then sometime this summer, it hasn't been released yet, Global Esport Federation will have their regional competition. So we'll be going through a second round of national competitions as well for various titles that will be added based on their roster. So watch out for some fighting games, watch out for some additional women's rosters to come up that we will be seeking players for. And so then they would be playing regionals sometime in the summer. And then the global esport games will be in China in December.
fantastic. That's good for Canadians to know that, we
Mhm.
haven't just selected Team Canada for a few esports and that's it. There's many
Right.
more opportunities coming out in the next little while, so people should be stay tuned to all the channels about that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to do a switch here because we've talked competition, competition, competition. But one thing I'm extremely passionate about is that esports isn't just about competitions. There are so many other moving parts. So I'd like to look at in each of the spaces that we have representatives here of how esports is offering other opportunities. So I'm going to start with Nathan about what are some things that young folks are doing in esports that aren't competitions, and how does it support how does esports support academics in the K to 12 space? So what do they learn? What's going on besides competition?
I mean, ultimately, um, that is the reason for why I truly believe that this all belongs in schools in the first place, right? Because the competition is just the key to all of the things that we get to bring and to connect students with. So our students, when you're looking at the local level, at playing on their individual team, their teachers are working with them on how to be a good winner, how to be a good loser. They're trying to teach them how to be coachable. And I anticipate in a few years our collegiate programs are going to be really feeling the work and success that we've been having in that situation. We're working with students who are very new to organized competition and representing their school, and having a coach working with them can be something that is a new experience for many of the students that go through our esports programs. But also taking a look at, again, that feeling of community and membership, offering them opportunities in things like streaming and shoutcasting. Even at the middle years level, we run a shoutcast at our school level that offers, grades 5 and 6 students who are really interested in esports but don't have a connection point, or maybe they don't feel that that's a skilled position for them, and they get to come in and showcase their own skills in a very different way. So there's a lot of different things that we focus on at the education level when we're looking at esports that goes beyond just my school beat your school. And although it feels really good when my school beats somebody else's school, and nobody here in this call is going to deny that, the fact is that when I'm having conversations with parents or with other educators about what esports can mean for their school and their community and for their child, a lot of our conversations aren't about, because then your kid gets to beat another kid. It's about how esports is going to give them opportunities later in life, how esports is going to open them up to, again, different communities and friendships that they may not have already had in the past. And again, when you take a look at things like scholarships being on the table and the ability to take this into higher learning, it's all of these things come together to create a really enticing package, especially for parents who struggle and see this as just another reason for them to be playing games.
You did an amazing segue right there into with the scholarships and the benefits of it in their lifelong learning. And then we're off to Tyler. Can you hit a little bit about not just the academic programs as one option for students in their learning, but also other opportunities for them that esports offers at some of the post-secondary institutions besides competition?
Yeah, so on the academic side, we see a lot more schools are investing in like official programs that are, esport programs for that you could take at college. And we're seeing a lot of schools begin creating micro credentials or like side classes as well, so that you can like have at least some sort of esport class on campus. So that's pretty cool to see. A lot of our varsity programs, also one of the great things that we do with academics is we're able to see our students' grades. So we can see when a player is struggling, we can see when a player is doing well. One of the great things that we can do is I can bench a player when they're failing and throw them on tutor table and make sure they have the appropriate time to associate to their studies, so they're not just gaming 24/7 the whole time. Like if we, we're in a collegiate space. If we, have students who do well on the video game but fail, then we've failed those students. So one of the great things about our programs getting to that varsity level is that there is some support for those students to make them successful humans, to make them successful students. And we hear, my background is within the student union and student life, and we hear all the time that, an involved student is a successful student. And a lot of esport people, they find their people and they find their home within the esports clubs or within the esport community. They're usually not the types that go to the Frost show, or they don't go to certain events, but they find their home and their people on campus within the esports community. And that's one of the most beautiful things that comes out of these esport programs is the lifelong connections that people are making. Or, I have one student who came in first year, he could barely make eye contact with me socially. And, year 3, he's now coaching 3 teams, and he's one of our leaders of our program. And you wouldn't believe that when I first met him, and just the growth that you see through a lot of students, successfully academically, but also personally, that can happen. It's amazing to see on the academic side, and the community is just beautiful. So it's like where you find your people. Like you go to events and you find, you go to the country show because you're interested in country music, you find friends who are interested in the same thing, or you join a certain club on campus to find friends. And it's really important because you move away. Most schools, you move away to go to a school. So you go there with no friends, no connections or anything. You could just walk into the esports room or walk into the esports community and find your people that will help you feel comfortable on that campus and help feel supported. So that's really great. And then, most esport programs have like a support around them where they can help students if they are in need, or help students if they have any questions within their school journey. So that's always a huge support that really helps academically. And the opportunities are limitless. So a lot of schools are really upping their production game. So people being producers, observers, social media content creators, casters. But there's so much more open up to that. So there's people who are doing like health and wellness programs for their esport players that are taking health and wellness at school, and they're providing it to the esport players, and they're adapting it towards people who need to do esport specific workouts. There's opportunities for any graphic designers, almost any program you take on the college level or university level, you can adapt within your esport program in some way. And that's a huge opportunity for people to do their co-ops, to people to do their internships, for people to do their final year projects, to do their final essays and everything within an esports spin. We're seeing people who go into the traditional sports management programs, say at Brock or Atlanta, anywhere, and they're going into those programs to become esport leaders and run their own esport teams. And it's the way that we're doing more and more panels, and the way we're doing more and more students that get involved within Esport Canada post-secondary that are trying to adapt their school life into esports as a career from here on out is amazing to see. So it creates lots of opportunities on a lot of campuses. On most campuses, it's kind of like on the volunteer side of things. It is amazing to see a lot of schools who are able to activate work study positions or student jobs on campus that are literally esports. So when you graduate, you can say you have 2-3 years of esports experience on the collegiate level, so you can apply for other esport positions and say you actually do have experience. You're not just a fresh grad that has no experience. It's just, I ran a stream once. You can say I ran a stream for 3 years on my campus, and I got involved with content creation. I worked the desk in the esports room. I worked IT. IT is a huge one that gets involved as well. So that's kind of how we adapt and we give those opportunities to students. And that's the way like the higher ups at schools really enjoy things, is how the esports gives more than just that competition. It's everything around competition that supports the program, that really helps sell those programs on campuses, and how they can help activate students who are in certain programs that are dealing with certain issues that actually can be supported through the esport program. So it's really great to see.
Actually, the school that I'm at, I think that employability and
Yeah.
all those opportunities that are offered in the breadth of it, besides being a pro player, is the key selling point for all of our management as well. That's a really key part of it. I'm going to flip on Melissa a little bit because it's not as much, I guess, about specific programming right now. But I'd like to talk a little bit about the benefit of esports being that community and the broader
Mhm.
goals of EDI. So
Mhm.
I know one of the big goals of Esport Canada has been advocacy and support for all sorts of initiatives in that area. And I'd love to hear, you and I are speaking on a panel in June,
Yeah.
and I know these topics are very close to your heart. I'd love if you
Yeah.
could mention a couple of ongoing projects that you're supporting, working on, having conversations about, of
Mhm.
really building that community and advocacy in DEI sectors. What's going on in that space that you're helping along with right now?
Yeah, I think that esports is a really interesting space in that we are definitely seeing a really big shift in our population, because when we look at Canadian statistics, the average age of the gamer is 41. And so if the average age is 41, and we know like all the kids are playing, that like there are a lot of people out there, casually playing Candy Crush on their phone, not recognizing the fact that, oh, by the way, you're a gamer. And so there's this sort of like disconnect in terms of identifying themselves as a gamer that is part of this conversation. And so, but I think really when it comes down to it, just like when we see kids playing Timbits hockey, not every one of those kids is going to grow up to play in the NHL. It's less than 1% that end up playing in the NHL, but it doesn't mean that that Timbits hockey is not significant or it's not important or what they're doing, what they're learning, what they're experiencing isn't important because just like Tyler and Nathan alluded to, all of those life skills that are developed that, you know, teamwork, that sportsmanship, even that personal pride and confidence and ability to self-regulate, all of that comes from those experiences. And what we're seeing now in esports is that people, it's not just a couple of people that are gaming, it's the majority of people are gaming in some capacity. And so when we look at that holistically from a sociology perspective, the opportunity there is endless because here all of a sudden we have, instead of like all the hockey fans do this and all of these people do this, now all of a sudden we have this interest group that contains cross sections of people who would never otherwise interact or have a reason to interact in the same space for a common reason. And so, as we look at something that diverse, we also want to look at okay, clearly we're going to end up with subsections. We're going to end up with pockets of people who identify as one thing or another because we're drawn to that need for belonging. And so we want to look at how do we as an ecosystem create belonging and opportunities for belonging where you can feel seen, heard, validated, and valued for all the incredible things that you bring and the people who are like minded while still developing empathy and understanding for people who are doing the same thing as you but are different. And so that's really what we want to look at doing and fostering in the communities that we're working with. And so right now what we've been looking at is how do we become more intentional in that work. And so up until now it's been more subtle things. So it's been looking at for example, within the international space, the first year that they offered women's competitions, we chose not to compete. And it was because it was not an inclusive definition of women. And so that choice to not compete was very intentional because if we were going to allow our women to compete, it needed to be for all women, not just ones that happened to be biologically women. It was for all women. And so now that next step of the conversation, now that that is allowed in international competition, how do we now push that conversation a little bit further and look at, okay, now we are noticing that it is still being labeled as female, like CSGO female. How do we now approach it as, can we make that a more inclusive term? Can it be now CSGO or CS2 women's instead of just, again, reinforcing that biological binary? And so we're looking at those kinds of shifts in influence as we can. But then also looking for how can we partner with people who are advocates in various equity groups, and not just specifically women in all the different equity groups. And so the way that I try to approach it is I look for who is working in that space and who is the voice or can be part of advocating for those communities. And how do I leverage my position of influence to create a space for them to do what they're already doing, but a little bit louder? And so allowing me to just make the space, move out of the way, and allow them to take that stage. And so, some of our partnerships that are going to be announced shortly, as you had alluded to, with a panel that's coming up in partnership with the French consulate, specifically around some of the gender equity, is going to be one of those initiatives. And we're hoping to launch some different programs specifically in the K-12 space in the fall as well. And right now it's a lot of fact finding, it's a lot of information gathering and looking for how do we approach this in a way that is not tokenism, that is authentic to the needs of those communities and the voices of those communities, so that the work that needs to be done can be done in a way that's really honoring.
Oh,
Sorry, that's a lot.
that's great. There's a lot going on. Tyler, is there some advocacy and initiatives to make post-secondary competition a little bit more equal or
Equal, there's a lot of
available? Yeah,
definitions for equal,
yes,
I would say.
I paused on that word there.
Yeah.
Just more equitable, more. Is there is there only one competition? Is there various types of competition or groups of competitions available, or does everybody compete in one league? That's it.
No, so there's multiple different types, and there, shout out to the Game Changers crews that are out there, and the Aurora series, and whole lots that are out there that do support on the post secondary side. You know, our gamers are gamers. We There is no gender bias on any of our teams or any of our competitions. You'll see a lot of schools have mixed genders, and it's celebrated, and it's not, it's on purpose, but it's not just to showcase it. It's because the person deserves to be there, and that's really what we do really well on the competitive side is no matter your background, no matter what things you had in your life, if you are a gamer and you want to get better together and you want to succeed together, you want to work at it, there's a place for you on a team, probably on a collegiate level somewhere. So you see some schools that have to do so. For example, in Aurora or a couple other leagues, you're allowed to mix schools, and sometimes that's just a numbers thing. So you see, the Western Wings. Shout out to all of them. Sometimes they'll collab with Fanshawe and Western, and we'll put together a team, and we'll have things that way. But the more programs that become varsity, the more programs that get support within the schools, you'll see more people connected that feel more safe. So, a lot of schools, when they meet as an esports club, they just meet in room 101. There's no staff member, there's no nothing. So when you have a program that's fully supported, there's a staff member there. So that just comes with a level of safety and a level of acceptance that any student at all can come into that room and be supported and feel safe and feel welcomed. And that's one of the great things about esports is you're a username more than you're a gender, which I love. You're just a gamer. You're just another person that likes to enjoy and play the game, whether it's competitive or just casually. So that's I would say one of the great strengths, I would say, of post secondary, and it's something that we all are trying to do better. I know St. Clair and a couple other schools are purposely recruiting just GC teams to make them to that next varsity level, which is fantastic to see. And then I know we all have mixed genders within all our teams, so it's a strength of ours, I would say, and it's something that we celebrate.
Awesome, thank you. And I know we're on the sort of less time left. So Nathan, if you'd like to either answer a little bit about any sort of um, advocacy, whether it's economic or EDI related, and then add maybe a final note on maybe some upcoming projects or something you'd like to give a shout out to or something that's going really well.
Yeah, sure. I would say that you know, as a teacher, um, I would say EDI is becoming more and more important at the school level program, and our I can speak about my own personal we our school program. We had a we have a very high male population that naturally gravitated toward esports when our program first started. And I don't know how that all kind of spills out or goes forward. But at the middle years level, we began to begin intentionally offering a single day for identifying female students, and found we had a whole new population taking part in our esports program. And so as we take a look at this and what that gamer tag means, I know that that's been one of the things that we've been kind of focusing on, helping other schools to be considering is there are gamers that aren't always represented until you give them a little bit of a poke. And we've been seeing a lot of success in that area. And in fact, Manitoba, the Manitoba School Esports Association, in their upcoming expo, has listed trying to bring in more diverse population as one of their goals. And it's great to see that coming out, because I think that the rich impact that it's going to have at the post secondary level, as more people feel not just that they can go in the room, but they feel like that is their space, is something that I'm really looking forward to, and within the next couple of years. As far as like the main challenges or what upcoming goals here, right? I mean, those two are so tied together, and it comes right back down to like funding and sponsorships at the K to 12 level, right? That's we have the backing of schools when we have our admin on board and they can see what these programs, what these projects are doing. And so when I'm having conversations with teachers about like how amazing esports can be for their community, what it's going to bring to their classes, the very uncomfortable conversation comes next, which is, and this is where you're going to get $15,000 worth of equipment. And I don't have answers to that right now because we're talking about individual schools. And thankfully, a lot of schools have been really creative in how they can find ways of bringing this in. Again, I can talk from my personal experience. We started with students bringing in their own equipment and we ran into issues there. So, but as we started, and our admin and our division could see the benefit and the impact that this program was having on those students who were taking a part in it, money started to show up. And the problem is that right now, I would love to kickstart 5 or 6 different school programs with somebody who could say, this is the equipment, this is what we have, this is how we can get that going, this is how we can get that initiative going. It's a gap in the K-12 space right now, and I'm sure that we'll hear as that question kind of gets passed around that's something that is a struggle for many of us.
Yeah, I think you've nailed funding is one we can almost go without saying for the rest of us is definitely an issue there. Still want to give Tyler a moment to what's an upcoming short-term project, something you're positive that you still want to share before we're wrapping up.
Shout out to funding, obviously supports and acceptance, I think, is a big one on the post-secondary side that we really have to get more people at the college and university levels to accept what the esports can bring to your campus. So the acceptance and support and funding is definitely a big one. Big shout out to St. Clair. Obviously, they just won Program of the Year, and that's a North American-wide recognition from the CECC. Big shout outs to everybody involved with our nationals, all of our PR chairs. Big shout out to Jennifer. The CIE is always doing a great thing every year, so that's always great to see. And everybody involved with this as well. And yeah, we have a lot of great successes on the pitch, the virtual pitch, I would say, with competitions and winning titles and championships and divisions and stuff. But just the overall growth has been the biggest success, I would say, within Esport Canada Post-Secondary, and getting new schools more involved in a major way has been amazing to see. The growth and the how quick the growth has happened on schools like Conestoga and Humber has been amazing and honestly inspiring for other schools to kind of follow their lead within this year. So big shout out to those guys, those programs as well. Those are shining examples of what Esport Canada Post-Secondary can do to help schools and help elevate. And big shout out to everybody that competes and gets involved with your communities. If you're a student, you're a gamer, that's where you find your people. Go find your people. They're within the esports club.
There we go. There's that enthusiasm jumping in. And
Yeah.
Melissa gets the final word, though.
Oh my gosh, so much pressure. Yeah, I definitely have to echo everything that has been said. Obviously, we are very, very honored and blessed to be working with so many incredible volunteers. And honestly, all of this is possible because of the volunteers that we work with. You can see the commitment from the community to making this work and making this grow and creating more recognition around what is happening within esports in Canada. And we want to see it grow sustainably. And for that to happen, we need to have more than just passionate volunteers. We also need to have some funding to really enable the work that they're doing. And so we're definitely on the prowl for that, but we're also being very proactive at the same time around giving people no reason not to. So that includes looking at how we can better develop policies, how we can better onboard advisors who can speak to things that, like, I am certainly no expert in many areas and capacities. And so I really rely heavily on our advisors to support the work that we're doing, but also looking at what is being done internationally and how we can incorporate things like safe sport. So as we look to getting official recognition from our federal government and from the Canadian Olympic Committee, I'm also looking at patterns globally as to what works best. Do you get COC or the Olympic recognition and then national recognition, or vice versa, and finding those pockets of opportunity, but then also looking to things like safe sport and the universal code of conduct around safe sport, and how we can start adopting and incorporating those policies set us up for success when having those important conversations with our federal government to say, look, we've already done our due diligence, we're here, we're ready to play ball, and so pick up your controller and game on.
Wow, we really pushed ourselves right up to our timeline. Thank you, all of you. If anybody wants to reach out to anybody on any of these on the panel, if you just go to the Esport Canada website, esportcanada.org, there is contact information for anyone there. Sorry for the rush to cut you off, but we're right backing up at the end of our time. Really appreciate your time. And say everyone, as you mentioned, we've all mentioned, everyone here is volunteers, and really appreciate your time. You guys do always do such an awesome job on these panels, and absolute pleasure being here. And if Jen has any, I guess, wrap up or final messages to send us off with, that would be great. And the audio. There we go.